This is Shanghai Pudong Airport, and it's eerily quiet here, hardly anyone around. Usually, this time of year, it's bustling, with people coming and going, but this year, it's just so deserted. Wow, it's bleak. A lot of duty-free shops at Shanghai International Airport have closed down, and even famous restaurants have shut their doors. The only place that seems to be open is a lone Starbucks. There's hardly anyone queuing at Terminal 2 in Shanghai. I read online that you should arrive 1 or 2 hours early, but it's practically empty, not a soul in sight. Apart from the sparse traffic at Shanghai Airport, a similar scene has unfolded at other international airports across China.
Why is the international airport so quiet during the Chinese New Year travel rush? I was worried about traffic jams on the highways during the New Year, afraid that the airport would be swamped with passengers and that security checks would take forever. So I set off from home early, only to find the usually bustling terminal entrance deserted. There was no need to queue for security checks. It was a walk-through process, and the boarding gates were just as empty.
这是早上9点
Here we are at 9 a.m. at Henan Xinjiang International Airport's International Departure Hall, and it's desolate, not a person in sight. It seems Hunan's economy is still struggling. To support the ongoing weak economic recovery post-pandemic, Chinese authorities have introduced multiple policies to attract more foreign businesses and tourists to engage in commerce, study, and travel within China. China has relaxed its visa restrictions for American tourists who no longer need to submit round-trip tickets, hotel reservation proofs, itineraries, or invitation letters to visit China. To foster people-to-people exchanges and economic and trade interactions between China and the U.S., the Civil Aviation Administration of China announced in November 2023 an increase in direct passenger flights between China and the U.S. from 48 to 70 flights per week. Furthermore, since the second half of 2023, China has expanded its visa-free circle of friends, offering visa-free entry to travelers from 11 countries, including Singapore, Brunei, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Spain, Malaysia, Thailand, Ireland, and Switzerland for stays of up to 15 days. Voice of America quoted analysts saying China's economic outlook is grim, with exports and investments, two main pillars of the economy, weakening. The authorities are keenly boosting consumption to stimulate the economy. The recent rare release of visa-free benefits aims at spurring consumption driven by tourism, particularly attracting foreign tourists and encouraging Chinese tourists to spend domestically, which is most beneficial for China's economy. Despite the preferential policies from Chinese authorities, traveling to China remains fraught with difficulties. As reported by Voice of America, Li Man, an American of Chinese descent working in international trade in Houston, travels to China 5 to 6 times a year, including several trips last year for business purposes. Li Man shared that while the requirements for tourist visas have been relaxed, the most cumbersome part, based on his experience, is the extensive personal information required for the Chinese visa application. Quote, they ask for contact details, workplaces, phone numbers, addresses of my parents, children, siblings, and all relatives associated with me. They also require information about my elementary, middle, and high schools, my first and second jobs, my boss's names and contact numbers. All of these details need to be submitted, end quote. Li Man noticed that since last year, foreigners entering China are asked many more questions at customs, giving him the impression that China maintains a very cautious rather than warmly welcoming attitude towards foreigners. He also noticed stricter restrictions on accommodations for foreigners. He had booked a Hilton hotel, but was told they were not yet qualified to host foreigners, forcing him to rebook. Before last year, such regulations were not so strictly enforced. According to the Exit and Entry Administration Law of People's Republic of China, foreigners staying in places other than hotels must register with the local Public Security Bureau within 24 hours of their arrival, a rule Li Man finds to be strictly enforced. Australian citizen Mr. Yang experienced this firsthand After registering his stay at the police station, neighborhood committee officials quickly visited him to verify his information and informed him about the times he had left his residence as a warning that the police were closely monitoring his every move, putting pressure on him. Mr. Yang said that not only he, but also his work contacts in China have come under authorities' scrutiny due to his interactions. After calling a female business owner in Zhejiang from his Australian phone to discuss a potential collaboration, she was summoned to the police station within hours. The police warned her it was an overseas scam call, recorded her statement, and threatened her not to answer his calls again. Mr. Yang shared, "My experiences in China have caused me significant stress and fear. I think it's best to avoid going to China, a hysterical country." Additionally, because mobile apps for hailing taxis, ordering takeout, and navigation in China differ from those in the US, downloading Chinese apps requires submitting extensive personal information and a local Chinese phone number, making travel inconvenient for Americans. Many places no longer accept cash, and American phones cannot use popular Chinese navigation apps like Baidu and Amaps. Yang Zhonghuang, a senior fellow for global health at the Council on Foreign Relations, mentioned that scholars traveling to China recently face practical issues, such as making mobile payments. Besides these inconveniences, there are concerns about personal privacy security for foreigners traveling to China. Angela, working in the US, told Radio Free Asia about her recent trip to China, noting the government's stricter control over citizens. Everywhere requires identity verification, whether taking high-speed trains, booking scenic spot tickets, or even registering a shared bike account. It seems aimed at information collection and control, tracking everyone's movements, but it's quite bothersome. Wan Xiaojun, who has lived in Japan for a long time, recently returned from visiting relatives in Qingdao, China. Wan observed that China's big data surveillance has reached an incredible level. Simply being in public places exposes one's privacy and even biometric data, as fingerprints are collected everywhere. There are many places you can access with just a fingerprint scan. Wan candidly stated he avoids going out in China unless necessary. "I return quickly when I do go out to avoid unnecessary trouble." Moreover, Wan noticed the scarcity of foreigners on the streets during his stay, attributing this to the strict surveillance. While in China, he did not use international roaming on his phone, but temporarily used a family member's phone. He noted that foreign phones are practically inoperable in China due to strict internet censorship and high costs, with connectivity priced at 2,980 yuan per day. Despite the ability to bypass internet restrictions, he chose not to avoid attracting unnecessary attention. Wan Xing, who recently acquired Japanese citizenship, and her Japanese husband have noted, now that foreign investors are pulling out, no one dares to go, especially with the ongoing pandemic. The Japanese are already scared off by China's COVID-19 situation, and her husband has warned her not to return to China. "You're now a foreign national and shouldn't go back to avoid being treated as a spy." Wan Xing's relatives in Japan are aware of the Chinese Communist Party's issues and advise her not to easily return to mainland China. Furthermore, due to the deteriorating US-China relations and the implementation of the revised anti-espionage law on July 1st last year, among other policies, Chinese authorities have found it easier to detain foreigners legally, causing Americans to have serious concerns about traveling to China. The U.S. State Department currently categorizes China as a Level 3 risk area, advising Americans to reconsider their travel plans. Zev Feintuck, a senior intelligence analyst at the consulting firm Global Guardian, which provides travel, asset, and cybersecurity consulting services to prominent corporations, shared in an interview with Voice of America that he advises clients against traveling to China if they have a history of working with the U.S. government, military, intelligence, or diplomatic sectors, have posted anti-China sentiments on social media with a significant following, or have been involved in human rights issues related to places like Tibet. He also discourages travel for individuals with dual Chinese-American citizenship, as China does not recognize dual nationality and may treat them as Chinese citizens, potentially preventing them from leaving China. Faintuck also mentioned that due to China's vastly different data sovereignty laws compared to the US, there's a high risk of leaking intellectual property and corporate secrets. He therefore suggested that Americans traveling to China use VPNs and avoid downloading and registering for Chinese local mobile apps. Despite relaxation in visa policies, Faintuck notes, there's a lot of geopolitical pressure and we're not seeing things getting better. The window for Western businesses to operate in China is closing, and we're not sure when it will shut completely, but we don't believe China will remain open indefinitely. Chairman of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee, Republican Representative Michael McCall from Texas, has urged Americans to be aware of the risks of traveling to China. He said that in June last year, the U.S. State Department issued a Level 3 travel advisory due to the risk of exit bans and wrongful detentions, asking U.S. citizens to reconsider travel to mainland China. As seen in the case of Mark Swidden from Texas, those arbitrarily detained in China have suffered horrific violations of their human rights. Texas resident Swidden was detained in Guangdong province in 2012 while purchasing construction materials. He was charged with drug manufacturing and trafficking and tried in 2013. In 2019, a Chinese court sentenced Swidden to death with a 2-year reprieve. Both the U.S. government and the United Nations considered him to be wrongfully detained and have urged Chinese authorities to release him. Even without the risk of detention or exit bans, traveling to China poses other risks. McCall wrote, when you connect to any Wi-Fi or Bluetooth network in China, the Chinese Communist Party can also extract information from your personal electronic devices and scour your social media accounts to ensure you've never said anything anti-China, even outside mainland China. In some cases, plainclothes police will follow foreigners. He advises Americans to abandon travel plans to China and instead visit allied countries and partners in the Indo-Pacific region. Yang Zhonghuang states that with deteriorating U.S.-China relations, there indeed exists a risk of unlawful detention for those traveling to China, especially with the implementation of the new anti-espionage law. The Chinese government encourages citizens to report any foreigners that might be affiliated with agencies like the FBI, making potential visitors feel unwelcome. The revised anti-espionage law expands the range of activities considered espionage by the government and rewards those who report espionage with accommodations and monetary rewards. An official WeChat account of China's National Security Department launched a comic series, Hidden Special Investigation Group, depicting national security officers outsmarting foreign spies, where the spies are portrayed as blonde-haired Caucasian men. On Chinese social media platforms like Weibo and Xiaohongshu, there's a trend of netizens sharing encounters with individuals who seem like spies, questioning whether they should alert national security, creating a national spy catching atmosphere. In 2023, Americans' overseas travel rebounded, with July's data surpassing pre-pandemic levels, but the number of Americans traveling to China has not recovered. Reports from the Wall Street Journal indicate that leisure travel from North America to China in the first half of 2023 was only 40% of the same period in 2019. According to USA Today, the most popular overseas destinations for Americans this summer were European countries like Italy and the UK, France, and Japan in Asia. Ms. Tai, who runs a travel agency in the US, states that due to political issues, middle-aged and older overseas Chinese have little interest in traveling to China, preferring destinations in South America, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. It's not that we're not doing the China market. It's just not the right time, not quite appropriate, whether it's political or other factors. Besides Americans, the number of international tourists traveling to China remains significantly reduced compared to before, especially in major cities like Beijing and Shanghai. On February 1st, the China Tourism Academy's International Research Institute released the China Inbound Tourism Development Report 2023 to 2024. Citing data from the National Immigration Administration, showing that the number of foreigners entering and exiting China in 2023 only recovered to 36% of the 2019 levels. According to data released by China's National Immigration Administration on January 18, 2023, the number of foreign travelers entering and exiting China was 35.5 million, far from the pre-pandemic level of 97.7 million in 2019. Moreover, the number of tourists coming through travel agencies is minimal. In 2023, travel agencies nationwide only managed to recover less than 10% of the 2019 levels of inbound tourists, reflecting the low recovery level of the tourism market. According to a December 2023 report by the Economic Daily, a newspaper affiliated with China's State Council, the recovery of inbound tourism in China lags far behind domestic tourism. The Ministry of Culture and Tourism reported that in the first half of 2023, travel agency only received 477,800 inbound tourists, a sharp decline from the 8.6 million in the first half of 2019.